Question 1. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of customer complaints regarding the handling of personal data during the hiring assessment process, with a high potential impact on SAIC Motor's reputation. An applicant has lodged a formal complaint alleging that their assessment data was mishandled. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the employee receiving this complaint? Option A. Escalate the complaint and relevant details to the SAIC Motor Compliance Department for investigation and guidance on appropriate response protocols. Option B. Directly access the applicant's assessment data to verify the alleged mishandling and then provide a direct explanation to the applicant. Option C. Forward the complaint to the applicant's direct hiring manager for them to handle as they see fit. Option D. Issue a standard, pre-approved response to the applicant acknowledging receipt of their complaint without further investigation. Correct answer is A. Escalate the complaint and relevant details to the SAIC Motor Compliance Department for investigation and guidance on appropriate response protocols. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient operations with the imperative of adhering to SAIC Motor's internal compliance policies and relevant regulatory frameworks, specifically concerning data handling and customer privacy. The pressure to quickly resolve a customer complaint, coupled with the potential for reputational damage, can lead to hasty decisions that bypass established procedures. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the resolution process is both effective and compliant. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the established regulatory framework and internal policies. By escalating the issue to the compliance department, the employee ensures that the handling of sensitive customer data aligns with the SAIC Motor Hiring Assessment Test's guidelines, which likely incorporate principles of data protection and privacy. This proactive step mitigates the risk of regulatory breaches, protects customer information, and upholds the company's commitment to ethical data management. It demonstrates a commitment to a robust compliance culture. An incorrect approach that involves directly accessing and sharing the customer's detailed assessment data without proper authorization or a clear, documented process for complaint resolution would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could violate data privacy laws and internal policies designed to protect sensitive personal information. Such an action could lead to severe penalties, including fines, legal action, and reputational damage for SAIC Motor. It also undermines the trust placed in the company by its customers and applicants. Another incorrect approach, such as providing a generic, unsubstantiated response to the customer without investigating the specific concerns raised, fails to address the root cause of the complaint and demonstrates a lack of diligence. This can lead to further customer dissatisfaction and potential escalation, while also failing to identify any systemic issues within the hiring assessment process that might require correction. Ethically, it shows a disregard for the customer's experience and their right to a fair and transparent process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's compliance policies and relevant regulation. When faced with a customer complaint that touches upon sensitive data or procedural fairness, the first step should be to consult internal guidelines. If the situation involves potential breaches of policy or regulation, or if the employee lacks the authority or expertise to resolve it appropriately, escalation to the relevant department, e.g., compliance, legal, or customer relations, is the most prudent course of action. This ensures that the issue is handled by individuals with the necessary knowledge and authority, and that all actions taken are documented and compliant. Question 2. Assessment of a financial advisor's response to a client's request for advice on a complex tax planning strategy that appears to exploit a loophole in the current tax legislation, with the client emphasizing the need to minimize their tax liability at all costs. Option A. Inform the client that the proposed strategy is too aggressive and refuse to provide any further advice on the matter. Option B. Advise the client on the potential risks and legal implications of the proposed strategy, including penalties and interest, and explore alternative, compliant tax planning methods that align with the client's objectives and the spirit of the law. Option C. Proceed with the proposed strategy, focusing solely on the technical interpretation of the tax legislation without considering the economic substance or potential for challenge by tax authorities. Option D. Immediately implement the client's proposed strategy to maximize tax savings, assuming the client understands and accepts any associated risks. The correct answer is B. Advise the client on the potential risks and legal implications of the proposed strategy, including penalties and interest, and explore alternative, compliant tax planning methods that align with the client's objectives and the spirit of the law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's desire for aggressive tax planning and the advisor's duty to ensure compliance with tax laws and regulations. The advisor must navigate the fine line between legitimate tax mitigation strategies and potentially abusive tax avoidance schemes, which could expose both the client and the advisor to significant penalties and reputational damage. The pressure to retain a valuable client can also cloud professional judgment, making it crucial to maintain objectivity and adhere strictly to ethical and legal obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing a thorough understanding of the client's financial situation and objectives, coupled with a rigorous assessment of the proposed tax strategy's compliance with the SAIC Motor Hiring Assessment Test regulatory framework. This involves not only identifying potential tax savings, but also evaluating the economic substance of the transaction, the likelihood of challenge by tax authorities, and the client's risk tolerance. Adherence to the principles of tax law, which generally disallow arrangements lacking commercial purpose or designed solely to evade tax, is paramount. This approach ensures that advice provided is both effective for the client and legally sound, thereby upholding the advisor's professional integrity and mitigating risks for all parties involved. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately implementing the client's proposed strategy without independent verification or due diligence. This fails to meet the professional duty of care and diligence required by the SAIC Motor Hiring Assessment Test's guidelines. It risks advising the client into a non-compliant or aggressive tax scheme, potentially leading to penalties, interest, and reputational damage for the client, and professional sanctions for the advisor. This approach prioritizes client satisfaction over regulatory compliance and ethical responsibility. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the client's proposal outright without a proper assessment of its merits or potential for legitimate tax planning. While caution is necessary, a blanket refusal without understanding the nuances of the proposal can alienate the client and may overlook a genuinely compliant and beneficial strategy. This approach lacks the analytical rigor expected of a professional advisor and may not serve the client's best interests within the bounds of the law. A third incorrect approach is to focus solely on the potential tax savings without considering the underlying legal and economic substance of the proposed transactions. Tax authorities often scrutinize arrangements that appear artificial or lack commercial reality. An advisor who ignores these aspects, even if the literal wording of a tax provision is met, is failing to provide comprehensive and responsible advice, potentially exposing the client to significant future liabilities. This approach demonstrates a superficial understanding of tax law and professional responsibility. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the client's objectives and the relevant regulatory landscape. This involves gathering all necessary information, conducting thorough research and analysis, identifying potential risks and benefits, and considering alternative compliance strategies. The advisor must then communicate these findings clearly to the client, explaining the rationale behind their recommendations and the potential consequences of different courses of action. Ethical considerations, such as integrity, objectivity, and professional competence, must guide every step of the process, ensuring that advice is not only technically sound, but also ethically defensible and compliant with all applicable laws and regulations. Question 3. Comparative studies suggest that when evaluating a new market entry strategy, a comprehensive impact assessment is crucial for informed decision-making. Which of the following approaches best reflects a robust and professionally sound impact assessment process for SAIC Motor? Option A. Prioritizing only the projected revenue growth and market share gains, while downplaying any potential operational disruptions or regulatory hurdles. Option B. Systematically identifying and analyzing potential financial, operational, reputational, and regulatory impacts across all relevant business units, and proposing mitigation strategies for identified risks. Option C. Conducting a superficial review based on readily available market reports without engaging internal stakeholders or considering long-term sustainability. Option D, focusing exclusively on the immediate cost savings associated with the new strategy, disregarding any potential negative effects on product quality or customer satisfaction. The correct answer is A, prioritizing only the projected revenue growth and market share gains, while downplaying any potential operational disruptions or regulatory hurdles. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to evaluate the potential consequences of a proposed business decision on various stakeholders and the company's operational integrity. The challenge lies in identifying and prioritizing the most significant impacts, considering both direct and indirect effects, and ensuring that the assessment aligns with the company's strategic objectives and regulatory obligations. A superficial or biased assessment could lead to poor decision-making, reputational damage, and potential non-compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and comprehensive evaluation of potential impacts across multiple dimensions. This includes considering financial, operational, reputational, and regulatory consequences. It necessitates engaging with relevant internal departments and potentially external experts to gather diverse perspectives and data. The focus should be on identifying both positive and negative impacts, quantifying them where possible, and assessing their likelihood and severity. This thoroughness ensures that decision-makers have a well-rounded understanding of the proposal's implications, enabling them to make informed choices that balance business objectives with risk mitigation and compliance. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and responsible business conduct, which are implicitly expected within the SAIC Motor Hiring Assessment Test Framework, emphasizing due diligence and foresight. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the immediate financial gains without considering broader implications. This fails to meet the professional standard of a holistic impact assessment, potentially overlooking significant risks such as regulatory penalties, damage to brand reputation, or negative effects on employee morale and customer loyalty. Such a narrow focus could lead to decisions that are profitable in the short term but detrimental in the long run, violating ethical considerations of sustainability and stakeholder responsibility. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a single department without rigorous data collection or cross-functional validation. This approach lacks the objectivity and comprehensiveness required for a credible impact assessment. It risks introducing bias and overlooking critical factors that might be apparent to other parts of the organization. This failure to conduct due diligence is a significant professional and ethical lapse, as it undermines the integrity of the decision-making process and could lead to unforeseen negative consequences. A third incorrect approach would be to dismiss potential negative impacts as insignificant without proper analysis or mitigation strategies. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to anticipate and manage risks effectively. It can lead to situations where unforeseen problems arise, causing disruption and potential harm to the company and its stakeholders, and could be seen as a dereliction of professional duty to identify and address all material risks. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured approach to impact assessment. This involves defining the scope of the assessment, identifying key stakeholders, gathering relevant data from multiple sources, analyzing potential impacts, both positive and negative, evaluating their significance, and developing mitigation strategies for adverse effects. The process should be iterative and involve consultation with relevant parties. Professionals should always strive for objectivity, thoroughness, and a clear understanding of the potential consequences of their recommendations, ensuring alignment with the company's strategic goals and regulatory environment. Question 4. Strategic planning requires a robust framework for evaluating potential initiatives. SAIC Motor is considering a new supplier for a critical component. The proposed supplier offers a significantly lower unit cost, which would immediately improve profit margins. However, their quality control processes are less stringent than current suppliers, and their delivery reliability has been inconsistent in past engagements with other companies. The internal procurement team is pushing for immediate adoption due to the cost savings, while the engineering department is concerned about potential quality issues and production delays. Which approach best navigates this strategic decision? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment and pilot program to evaluate the new supplier's quality and reliability, before committing to a large-scale contract, while also exploring alternative suppliers with a better balance of cost and quality. Option B. Reject the new supplier outright due to concerns about quality and reliability, prioritizing the status quo and avoiding any potential disruption. Option C. Immediately approve the new supplier based on the significant cost savings, assuming that any quality or delivery issues can be addressed reactively as they arise. Option D. Proceed with the new supplier, but instruct the procurement team to closely monitor their performance and address any issues on a case-by-case basis without a formal pilot program. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment and pilot program to evaluate the new supplier's quality and reliability before committing to a large-scale contract, while also exploring alternative suppliers with a better balance of cost and quality. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term strategic goals, all while adhering to SAIC Motor's internal policies and potentially external regulatory guidelines, though for this exam, we focus solely on the internal framework. The pressure to meet short-term targets can often lead to decisions that compromise future sustainability or ethical conduct. Careful judgment is required to identify the most responsible and effective path forward. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, data-driven evaluation of all viable options before committing to a course of action. This aligns with principles of good governance and responsible decision-making, ensuring that strategic choices are informed and defensible. It demonstrates a commitment to understanding the full implications of each decision, fostering a culture of accountability and foresight within SAIC Motor. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without considering the impact on product quality or customer satisfaction would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to reputational damage, increased warranty claims, and a decline in market share, ultimately undermining the company's long-term strategic objectives. It fails to consider the interconnectedness of operational efficiency and customer loyalty, a key tenet of sustainable business practice. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established internal approval processes to expedite a decision, even with good intentions, would be ethically problematic. This undermines the integrity of SAIC Motor's governance structure and could lead to unforeseen risks or non-compliance with internal policies designed to protect the company and its stakeholders. It demonstrates a lack of respect for established procedures and a potential for unchecked decision-making. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal intuition rather than objective analysis would be professionally unsound. Strategic decisions must be grounded in facts and data to be effective and justifiable. Relying on gut feelings can lead to biased judgments and decisions that are not in the best interest of the company or its stakeholders. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that includes clearly defining the problem or opportunity, gathering relevant information and data, identifying and evaluating alternative solutions, selecting the best option based on predefined criteria, including strategic alignment, risk assessment, and ethical considerations, implementing the chosen solution, and monitoring its effectiveness. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are well-reasoned, aligned with organizational goals, and ethically sound. Question 5. To address the challenge of a customer inquiring about a highly attractive advertised vehicle offer that seems unusually favorable, what is the most appropriate course of action for a sales consultant at SAIC Motor? Option A. Politely inform the customer that such offers are rarely as good as they appear and suggest they consider other available vehicles. Option B. Ask the customer to provide proof that they are eligible for such a special offer before engaging in further discussion. Option C. Thoroughly verify the advertised offer's terms and conditions against SAIC Motor's official promotional guidelines and relevant consumer protection regulations before confirming details with the customer. Option D. Proceed with the sale immediately to secure the customer and the commission, assuming the advertisement is accurate and all terms are understood. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the sale immediately to secure the customer and the commission, assuming the advertisement is accurate and all terms are understood. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate business pressures with long-term ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet sales targets can lead to a temptation to overlook potential issues or to prioritize short-term gains over customer well-being and adherence to SAIC Motors' internal policies and relevant consumer protection laws. The decision-maker must navigate conflicting priorities and demonstrate sound judgment under pressure. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of the customer's request against established company policies and regulatory requirements. This means verifying the customer's eligibility for the advertised offer, ensuring all necessary documentation is in order, and confirming that the proposed transaction aligns with SAIC Motors' commitment to fair dealing and transparency. This approach upholds regulatory compliance by preventing misrepresentation and ensuring customers receive accurate information about offers. Ethically, it demonstrates integrity and a commitment to customer trust, which are foundational to sustainable business practices. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing the immediate sale and the associated commission over thorough verification. This could lead to misrepresenting the offer, failing to disclose crucial terms and conditions, or even facilitating a transaction that is not genuinely in the customer's best interest or compliant with the advertised terms. This approach risks regulatory breaches related to consumer protection and advertising standards, and it erodes customer trust, potentially leading to complaints, reputational damage, and future legal liabilities for SAIC Motor. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the customer's query outright without proper investigation, perhaps due to a belief that the advertised offer is too good to be true or that the customer is mistaken. This can lead to a missed opportunity to clarify a genuine offer or to identify a potential misunderstanding that could be resolved. Ethically, it demonstrates poor customer service and a lack of diligence. From a regulatory standpoint, failing to adequately address customer inquiries about advertised offers could be seen as a failure to provide clear and accurate information, potentially violating consumer rights. A third incorrect approach might be to proceed with the sale based on a superficial understanding of the offer, assuming that the advertised details are sufficient and that further clarification is unnecessary. This bypasses the critical step of ensuring both the customer and the salesperson fully comprehend the terms, conditions, and any limitations of the offer. This can lead to disputes, dissatisfaction, and potential breaches of contract or consumer protection laws if the reality of the offer differs from the customer's understanding. It also fails to uphold the professional duty of care to the customer. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with understanding the core request and the relevant context. This involves identifying all applicable internal policies, regulatory guidelines, and ethical principles. The next step is to gather all necessary information to assess the situation objectively. This includes verifying facts, clarifying ambiguities, and considering potential risks and benefits. A crucial part of this framework is to consult relevant resources or supervisors when uncertainty exists. Finally, the decision should be made based on a clear rationale that prioritizes compliance, ethical conduct, and the long-term interests of both the customer and the organization. Question 6. Compliance review shows that a senior manager involved in evaluating a significant supplier contract has a close family member who is a principal owner of one of the bidding companies. The manager is aware of this familial relationship, but has not yet disclosed it internally, believing they can remain objective in the evaluation process. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for this manager? Option A. Proceed with the evaluation as planned, confident in their ability to remain objective and make the best decision for SAIC Motor, as no explicit rules were broken by not disclosing yet. Option B. Inform the bidding company's principal owner of the potential conflict and suggest they withdraw their bid to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Option C. Continue the evaluation but make a note in the final recommendation to highlight the familial relationship without formally disclosing it beforehand. Option D. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to the designated compliance officer or relevant senior management, and request guidance on recusal or other conflict mitigation measures. The correct answer is D. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to the designated compliance officer or relevant senior management, and request guidance on recusal or other conflict mitigation measures. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a desire to secure a valuable contract and the imperative to adhere to SAIC Motors' internal ethical guidelines and relevant regulatory frameworks concerning conflicts of interest. The decision-maker must navigate the potential for personal gain to influence business decisions, which is a core area of regulatory scrutiny and ethical concern in the automotive industry. Careful judgment is required to ensure that SAIC Motors' interests are paramount and that no undue influence is exerted. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency and adherence to established ethical protocols, immediately disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the relevant internal authority, e.g., compliance department or senior management. The decision-maker demonstrates integrity and allows for an objective assessment of the situation. This aligns with regulatory expectations that employees act in the best interest of their employer and avoid situations that could compromise their impartiality. It also allows SAIC Motor to implement appropriate safeguards, such as recusal from decision-making processes related to the contract or enhanced oversight, thereby mitigating risk. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the contract negotiation without disclosure would constitute a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This action would breach SAIC Motors' internal code of conduct regarding conflicts of interest and could violate broader principles of corporate governance and fair dealing expected by regulatory bodies overseeing business conduct. It creates an appearance of impropriety, even if no explicit wrongdoing occurred, and undermines trust within the organization and with external partners. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to subtly influence the decision-making process in favor of the contract without explicit disclosure, is equally problematic. This demonstrates a lack of integrity and a willingness to circumvent established procedures for personal or familial benefit. It is a direct contravention of the duty of loyalty owed to SAIC Motor and exposes the company to reputational damage and potential regulatory sanctions if discovered. The professional reasoning framework that should be applied in such situations involves a multi-step process. 1. Identify the potential conflict of interest. 2. Consult SAIC Motors' internal policies and relevant regulatory guidelines. 3. Disclose the conflict to the appropriate internal authority promptly and fully. 4. Seek guidance on how to proceed, which may involve recusal from decision-making. 5. Document all actions taken and decisions made. This framework ensures that decisions are made ethically, legally, and in the best interest of the organization. Question 7. The evaluation methodology shows that SAIC Motor is assessing a potential new supplier for critical components. To understand the supplier's manufacturing processes and quality control measures, the procurement team is considering different methods for gathering information. Which method best upholds SAIC Motors' commitment to ethical sourcing and data privacy while ensuring a thorough assessment? Option A. Relying on information gathered from industry forums and publicly accessible company reports, assuming this information is fair game for competitive analysis without direct supplier confirmation. Option B. Asking the supplier for a general overview of their operations and quality control, with the understanding that SAIC Motor will then conduct its own independent investigations using any means necessary to verify the information. Option C. Requesting a comprehensive data room access from the supplier, clearly outlining the specific documents and information required for review, and obtaining their explicit written consent for the scope and purpose of the data access. Option D. Engaging with former employees of the potential supplier to gather anecdotal evidence and insights into their operational strengths and weaknesses. The correct answer is C. Requesting a comprehensive data room access from the supplier, clearly outlining the specific documents and information required for review, and obtaining their explicit written consent for the scope and purpose of the data access. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the need for efficient information gathering and the stringent requirements for client confidentiality and data protection mandated by SAIC Motors' internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. The pressure to quickly assess a potential supplier's capabilities must be balanced against the ethical and legal obligations to handle sensitive information responsibly. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes obtaining explicit, informed consent from the potential supplier, before accessing any proprietary or confidential information. This aligns with principles of data privacy and ethical business conduct, ensuring that SAIC Motor acts with integrity and respects the intellectual property and commercial sensitivities of third parties. It also mitigates legal risks associated with unauthorized data access or disclosure. An incorrect approach that involves accessing publicly available information without specific consent, while seemingly less intrusive, can still be problematic. If the publicly available information was inadvertently disclosed or is subject to restrictions on its use for competitive analysis, SAIC Motor could face reputational damage or legal challenges. This approach fails to proactively ensure compliance with data usage terms and conditions. Another incorrect approach, which involves requesting broad access to all company data without clearly defining the scope and purpose of the review, is ethically and legally unsound. This demonstrates a lack of respect for the supplier's proprietary information and creates an unacceptable risk of data misuse or breach. It also signals a potentially aggressive or untrustworthy business partner. Finally, an approach that relies on informal channels or insider knowledge to gather information about the supplier is highly unprofessional and ethically compromised. This can lead to the use of inaccurate or biased information, and it bypasses established due diligence processes, potentially exposing SAIC Motor to significant risks. It also undermines the integrity of the procurement process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of SAIC Motor's internal policies on supplier due diligence, data protection, and ethical conduct. It requires a proactive assessment of potential risks, including legal, reputational, and operational risks. Professionals should always seek to obtain explicit consent for data access, clearly define the scope and purpose of any information gathering, and utilize established, transparent, and ethical procurement procedures. When in doubt, consulting with legal or compliance departments is crucial. Question 8. Market research demonstrates that a particular investment fund has experienced significant growth over the past 3 years, attracting considerable investor interest. A potential client who has expressed a desire for capital growth approaches you for advice. They have provided some basic financial information, but have not detailed their risk tolerance or investment experience. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory requirements for providing financial advice? Option A. Conduct a detailed assessment of the client's financial situation, investment objectives, risk tolerance, and investment experience before recommending any specific product, including the high-growth fund. Option B. Recommend the high-growth fund, highlighting its recent performance and potential for future gains, as it appears to align with the client's stated desire for capital growth. Option C. Suggest the client invest in a diversified portfolio of low-risk assets, as this is generally a safer approach for all clients seeking capital growth. Option D. Proceed with recommending the high-growth fund, assuming that a desire for capital growth inherently implies a willingness to accept higher risk. The correct answer is B. Recommend the high-growth fund, highlighting its recent performance and potential for future gains, as it appears to align with the client's stated desire for capital growth. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the complexities of financial product suitability and client understanding within the specific regulatory framework of the SAIC Motor Hiring Assessment Test. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that a recommendation is not only financially sound, but also comprehensible and appropriate for the client's specific circumstances and risk tolerance, as mandated by regulatory principles. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the client's financial situation, investment objectives, and risk appetite before making any product recommendations. This aligns with the fundamental regulatory duty of care and the principle of acting in the client's best interests. Specifically, it adheres to guidelines that require financial advisors to conduct adequate client due diligence and to recommend products that are suitable for the client's profile. This proactive and client-centric methodology minimizes the risk of mis-selling and ensures compliance with consumer protection regulations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the potential for high returns without adequately assessing the client's risk tolerance is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a breach of the duty to recommend suitable products and could lead to significant financial harm to the client, potentially resulting in regulatory sanctions for mis-selling. Another incorrect approach, which involves recommending a product based on its popularity or a general market trend without individual client assessment, disregards the personalized nature of financial advice and the regulatory requirement for suitability. This demonstrates a lack of professional diligence and a failure to uphold the client's best interests. Recommending a complex product without ensuring the client fully understands its features, risks, and implications is also a critical regulatory and ethical failure, as it undermines informed decision-making and can lead to client detriment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, gather comprehensive client information. Second, analyze this information to determine suitability criteria. Third, identify potential products that meet these criteria. Fourth, evaluate the risks and benefits of each suitable product in relation to the client's profile. And finally, present the recommendation clearly, ensuring the client understands all aspects before proceeding. This systematic process ensures that recommendations are both compliant and in the client's best interests. Question 9. Consider a scenario where SAIC Motor is preparing to launch a new electric vehicle model in a rapidly evolving market. The internal team responsible for product development has identified several potential operational risks associated with manufacturing and supply chain disruptions. Which of the following approaches to risk assessment best aligns with the principles expected in a professional hiring assessment context, focusing on a robust and compliant process? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment involving cross-functional teams, utilizing a documented methodology to identify, analyze, and evaluate potential risks, and then develop mitigation strategies. Option B. Assign the entire risk assessment responsibility to the junior analyst in the risk department, trusting their ability to flag any significant concerns without further guidance. Option C. Focus the risk assessment primarily on risks that have already caused minor delays in previous product launches, assuming these are the most probable future issues. Option D. Rely on the immediate insights and experience of the lead product engineer to identify and address the most obvious risks, assuming they have a good grasp of the situation. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment involving cross-functional teams, utilizing a documented methodology to identify, analyze, and evaluate potential risks, and then develop mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient risk identification with the regulatory imperative to conduct thorough and documented assessments. The SAIC Motor Hiring Assessment Test, operating within its specified regulatory framework, assumed to be aligned with general principles of financial services regulation and corporate governance. Though specific jurisdiction is not provided, we will proceed with a general understanding of such frameworks, mandates a structured approach to risk management. The challenge lies in ensuring that the risk assessment process is not merely a superficial exercise, but a robust mechanism that informs strategic decision-making and compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it emphasizes a systematic and documented process for identifying, analyzing, and evaluating risks. This aligns with regulatory expectations for due diligence and proactive risk management. A comprehensive risk assessment, involving multiple stakeholders and a clear methodology, ensures that potential threats to the business, including those related to operational efficiency, market changes, and compliance, are adequately understood and addressed. This structured approach provides a defensible record for regulatory scrutiny and internal governance. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the immediate availability of information without a formal review process fails to meet regulatory standards for due diligence, risks overlooking critical, albeit less obvious, risks and does not provide a documented basis for decisions. This can lead to noncompliance with internal policies and external regulations that require evidence of a considered risk assessment. Another incorrect approach, focusing only on risks that have already materialized, is reactive rather than proactive. Regulations typically require forward-looking risk identification and mitigation strategies, not just responses to past events. This approach leaves the organization vulnerable to future, similar risks. Finally, an approach that delegates the entire risk assessment to a single individual without oversight or validation can lead to bias, incomplete analysis, and a lack of accountability, which is contrary to principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a structured, documented, and collaborative approach to risk assessment. This involves defining clear objectives for the assessment, identifying relevant stakeholders, selecting appropriate methodologies, conducting thorough analysis, documenting findings, and establishing mechanisms for ongoing review and adaptation. This process ensures that risk management is integrated into the organization's strategic planning and operational activities, thereby fostering resilience and compliance. Question 10. The investigation demonstrates that SAIC Motors' marketing department has drafted promotional material for a new vehicle model that includes claims about fuel efficiency and performance. While the marketing team believes these claims are accurate based on internal testing, there is a potential for consumers to interpret these figures in a way that might not be fully representative of real-world driving conditions. The company is preparing to launch a widespread advertising campaign across various media platforms. Which of the following actions best ensures regulatory compliance and professional conduct in this situation? Option A. Submit the draft advertising material to the company's legal and compliance departments for a thorough review against the UK Advertising Standards Authority, SAIC, guidelines and CAP code before publication. Option B. Publish the advertisement but include a disclaimer that is so small and vague that it is unlikely to be noticed or understood by the average consumer. Option C. Rely on the marketing team's understanding of the regulations, assuming that as long as the figures are technically correct according to internal data, they will be compliant. Option D. Proceed with the advertising campaign as drafted, as the claims are based on internal testing, and the marketing team is confident in their interpretation. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the advertising campaign as drafted, as the claims are based on internal testing, and the marketing team is confident in their interpretation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to promote its products and the regulatory obligation to ensure advertising is fair, clear, and not misleading. The SAIC Motor Hiring Assessment Test, focusing on regulatory compliance, expects candidates to understand the nuances of advertising standards and their implications for consumer trust and legal adherence. Careful judgment is required to balance commercial objectives with legal and ethical responsibilities. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the Advertising Standards Authority, SAIC, guidelines, which are the primary regulatory framework governing advertising in the UK. Specifically, it aligns with the CAP code, UK Code of Non-Broadcast Advertising and Direct and Promotional Marketing, principles that prohibit misleading advertising and require substantiation of claims. By seeking legal and compliance review before publication, the company demonstrates a commitment to responsible marketing, mitigating legal risks, and safeguarding its reputation. This proactive stance ensures that all promotional material is accurate, verifiable, and compliant with consumer protection laws. An incorrect approach that involves publishing the advertisement without further review fails to meet regulatory requirements. This constitutes a direct breach of the CAP code, specifically the rules against misleading advertising and the requirement for evidence to support claims. Such an action exposes the company to potential ASA investigations, sanctions, and damage to its brand image. Another incorrect approach, which involves relying solely on the marketing team's interpretation of the regulations, is also professionally unacceptable. Marketing teams, while knowledgeable about product features, may not possess the specialized legal and compliance expertise necessary to interpret complex advertising regulations accurately. This can lead to unintentional breaches and a false sense of security regarding compliance. A further incorrect approach, which involves downplaying the potential for misinterpretation by consumers, demonstrates a disregard for the spirit of consumer protection regulations. The CAP code emphasizes that advertisements should be understood by their target audience. Ignoring potential consumer confusion or misinterpretation, even if unintentional, can still lead to a finding of misleading advertising. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. First, identify the relevant regulatory framework, in this case, UK advertising law and ASA/CAP code. Second, evaluate the proposed advertising content against these regulations, paying close attention to claims made, potential for ambiguity, and the target audience's likely understanding. Third, consult with internal legal and compliance departments or external experts to obtain a definitive assessment of compliance. Fourth, If any doubt or potential for non-compliance exists, revise the advertisement or seek further clarification before publication. This systematic approach ensures that commercial activities are conducted within legal and ethical boundaries. Question 11. Upon reviewing the current vehicle assembly line workflow, a proposal has been put forth to significantly streamline the quality inspection phase by reducing the number of mandatory checks at specific stations. The stated goal is to increase throughput and reduce labor costs. What is the most prudent approach to implementing this proposed process optimization? Option A. Implement the reduced inspection checks, but only after a brief internal discussion among the production management team, without formal documentation or external validation. Option B. Proceed with the reduced inspection checks, focusing solely on the cost savings and throughput increase, and address any quality issues that may arise retrospectively. Option C. Immediately implement the reduced inspection checks across all assembly lines to realize the projected efficiency gains as quickly as possible, assuming the current quality standards are sufficient. Option D. Conduct a pilot program for the reduced inspection checks on a limited production run, gathering data on defect rates and customer feedback, while simultaneously reviewing the impact on compliance with SAIC Motors' internal quality standards and any relevant automotive manufacturing regulations. The correct answer is D. Conduct a pilot program for the reduced inspection checks on a limited production run, gathering data on defect rates and customer feedback, while simultaneously reviewing the impact on compliance with SAIC Motors' internal quality standards and any relevant automotive manufacturing regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing efficiency gains with the potential for unintended consequences that could impact compliance and operational integrity. The pressure to implement changes quickly, driven by a desire for process optimization, can lead to overlooking critical control points or regulatory requirements. Careful judgment is needed to ensure that the pursuit of efficiency does not compromise the company's adherence to its internal policies and any applicable industry standards or regulations relevant to SAIC Motors operations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, phased implementation that includes robust testing and validation. This aligns with principles of good governance and risk management, ensuring that process changes are effective, efficient, and compliant before full rollout. By involving relevant stakeholders and conducting pilot programs, the company can identify and rectify potential issues early, minimizing disruption and ensuring that the optimized processes meet all necessary standards and objectives. This methodical approach is crucial for maintaining operational stability and regulatory adherence. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid implementation without adequate testing or stakeholder consultation would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to the introduction of new errors or inefficiencies, potentially causing operational disruptions and increasing the risk of non-compliance with internal controls or external regulations. Such a failure to adequately assess the impact of changes demonstrates a disregard for due diligence and a lack of commitment to maintaining a robust operational framework. Another incorrect approach that bypasses established change management protocols, such as seeking necessary approvals or documenting the changes, would represent a significant ethical and professional lapse. This bypass could lead to a lack of accountability, make it difficult to audit or trace the changes, and potentially violate internal policies designed to ensure controlled and authorized modifications to business processes. This undermines the integrity of the company's operational procedures and governance structure. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach to change management. This includes clearly defining the objectives of the optimization, identifying all potential impacts, operational, financial, compliance, engaging relevant stakeholders for input and buy-in, developing a detailed implementation plan with clear milestones and rollback strategies, conducting thorough testing and validation, and establishing mechanisms for ongoing monitoring and evaluation. Prioritizing risk assessment and mitigation throughout the process is paramount. Question 12. Operational review demonstrates that a customer has lodged a significant complaint regarding a recent vehicle purchase, alleging a serious defect that poses a safety risk. The sales representative, eager to retain the customer and avoid negative publicity, is considering offering an immediate full refund and a complimentary service package without formally logging the complaint or initiating the standard internal investigation protocol. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory compliance and professional best practice? Option A. Log the customer's complaint with all provided details into the company's official complaint management system and initiate the prescribed internal investigation process involving relevant technical and legal departments. Option B. Offer a partial refund and a minor service discount and instruct the customer to follow up via email with any further concerns. Option C. Immediately process the refund and complimentary service package as requested by the customer to ensure customer satisfaction and prevent escalation. Option D. Advise the customer that the complaint cannot be addressed without immediate proof of the alleged defect and suggest they seek independent verification. The correct answer is C. Immediately process the refund and complimentary service package as requested by the customer to ensure customer satisfaction and prevent escalation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the desire to quickly resolve a customer complaint and the imperative to adhere to regulatory requirements for data handling and record keeping. The pressure to provide immediate customer satisfaction can lead to shortcuts that bypass essential compliance steps, potentially exposing the company to significant regulatory penalties and reputational damage. The challenge lies in balancing customer service efficiency with robust regulatory adherence. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting the customer's complaint, including all relevant details, and then initiating the internal investigation process as mandated by SAIC Motor's internal policies, which are designed to align with relevant regulatory frameworks. This ensures that the complaint is handled systematically, that all necessary information is captured for potential future audits or investigation, and that the resolution process is transparent and traceable. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance, demonstrating a commitment to both customer welfare and legal obligations. Specifically, this approach would likely adhere to data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR if applicable to the jurisdiction, or equivalent local data privacy laws, by ensuring personal data is handled appropriately during the investigation and resolution, and also to consumer protection laws by ensuring fair and transparent complaint handling. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately offering a refund or replacement without a thorough investigation or proper documentation. This bypasses the regulatory requirement to investigate and record customer complaints, which is crucial for identifying systemic issues, demonstrating compliance with consumer protection laws, and fulfilling data retention obligations. It creates a lack of audit trail and could be seen as an attempt to conceal potential product defects or service failures. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the complaint without a proper investigation, citing a lack of immediate evidence. This fails to meet the regulatory expectation for a fair and thorough complaint handling process. It can lead to breaches of consumer rights legislation and damage the company's reputation, as customers are entitled to have their grievances addressed systematically. Furthermore, it neglects the opportunity to identify and rectify potential operational or product issues. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the resolution to a junior staff member without providing them with clear guidelines or oversight on the regulatory requirements for complaint handling and data privacy. This can lead to inconsistent handling of complaints, potential breaches of data protection laws, and an inadequate record of the interaction, all of which are regulatory failures. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to a compliant and standardized complaint resolution process. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance as a foundational element of all customer interactions. This involves 1. Understanding and internalizing all relevant regulatory requirements and company policies related to customer complaints and data handling. 2. Implementing a standardized process for logging, investigating, and resolving complaints that includes clear documentation steps. 3. Seeking guidance from compliance or legal departments when faced with ambiguous situations. 4. Regularly reviewing and updating complaint handling procedures to ensure ongoing adherence to evolving regulations. This systematic approach ensures that customer satisfaction is pursued within a framework of legal and ethical responsibility. Question 13. Examination of the data shows that during a crucial negotiation for a significant acquisition by SAIC Motor, a contact outside the direct negotiation team provides a piece of information that, if true, would substantially alter the valuation of the target company. This information is not publicly available and has not been disclosed by the target company. The contact implies that this information is highly reliable and was obtained through privileged access. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the SAIC Motor representative receiving this information? Option A. Proceed with the acquisition negotiations, but discreetly attempt to verify the information internally before making any decisions, without disclosing the source of the tip. Option B. Share the information with a senior colleague in a different department who might have insights into the target company's operations to gauge its potential impact. Option C. Continue with the acquisition negotiations as planned, assuming the information is either inaccurate or not material enough to warrant a halt in proceedings. Option D. Immediately cease all discussions related to the acquisition and report the receipt of this information, including its nature and source, to the relevant compliance or legal department. The correct answer is D. Immediately cease all discussions related to the acquisition and report the receipt of this information, including its nature and source, to the relevant compliance or legal department. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the conflict between a desire to secure a significant deal and the obligation to adhere to ethical principles and regulatory guidelines concerning insider information. The pressure to close the deal quickly, coupled with the potential for substantial personal and company gain, can create a temptation to overlook or downplay the significance of the non-public information. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation, ensuring that all actions are compliant with the SAIC Motor Hiring Assessment Test's specified regulatory framework, which likely includes provisions against insider trading and mandates fair disclosure practices. Correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes integrity, regulatory compliance, and fairness. By immediately ceasing discussions and reporting the situation, the professional upholds the principle of not trading on or disseminating material non-public information. This aligns with the spirit and letter of regulations designed to maintain market integrity and prevent unfair advantages. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct, which is paramount in the financial services industry, and specifically within the context of the SAIC Motor Hiring Assessment Test expectations. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the deal while attempting to verify the information internally without disclosing the source or nature of the tip would be a regulatory and ethical failure. This action could be construed as using or attempting to use material non-public information, even if the intent is to confirm its accuracy. It bypasses the proper channels for handling such information and risks violating rules against insider trading. Another incorrect approach, such as sharing the information with a trusted colleague who is not directly involved in the deal, would also be a significant ethical and regulatory breach. This constitutes the unauthorized dissemination of material non-public information, potentially leading to insider trading by others and undermining market fairness. A third incorrect approach, which is to ignore the information and proceed as if it were never received, is also problematic. While seemingly benign, it fails to address a potential regulatory risk and misses an opportunity to ensure compliance and ethical conduct. It demonstrates a lack of diligence in managing sensitive information. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential ethical and regulatory conflicts. This involves recognizing when sensitive, non-public information is received and assessing its materiality. The next step is to consult relevant internal policies and external regulations. If there is any doubt, seeking guidance from compliance departments or legal counsel is crucial. The principle of when in doubt, err on the side of caution is a guiding tenet. Professionals must prioritize transparency, fairness, and adherence to the law above immediate personal or company gain. Question 14. Cost-benefit analysis shows that concealing a known, minor defect in a vehicle could lead to a quicker sale and meet quarterly targets, while disclosing it might result in a delayed sale or a price reduction. The defect is not immediately safety critical, but could become a more significant issue over time. What is the most ethically and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Proceed with the sale without mentioning the defect, assuming it is minor enough not to cause immediate problems and that the customer will likely not discover it soon. Option B. Suggest the customer purchase an extended warranty that would cover potential future issues without explicitly detailing the current known defect. Option C. Fully disclose the known defect to the potential buyer, explaining its nature and potential implications, and offer a fair resolution such as a repair or discount. Option D. Downplay the significance of the defect, suggesting it is a common and easily fixable issue, to avoid deterring the customer from purchasing the vehicle. Correct answer is C. Fully disclose the known defect to the potential buyer, explaining its nature and potential implications, and offer a fair resolution such as a repair or discount. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it pits potential short-term financial gains against long-term ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet sales targets can create an environment where shortcuts are considered, but adhering to ethical principles and regulatory frameworks is paramount. Careful judgment is required to navigate the conflict between immediate business objectives and the duty to act with integrity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency and honesty, which are foundational ethical principles in the automotive industry, and are often reinforced by regulatory requirements concerning consumer protection and fair trading. By disclosing the known defect, the salesperson upholds their duty of care to the customer and avoids potential legal repercussions, reputational damage, and regulatory sanctions that could arise from misrepresentation or concealment of material facts. This aligns with the SAIC Motor's likely internal code of conduct and any applicable consumer protection laws that mandate disclosure of significant product flaws. An incorrect approach that involves withholding information about the defect is ethically unacceptable because it constitutes deception. This violates the principle of honesty and fair dealing, potentially leading to a breach of contract and consumer rights violations. Such an action could also contravene specific regulations that require full disclosure of product defects, especially those that could impact safety or performance. Another incorrect approach, which might involve downplaying the defect or suggesting it's a minor issue without full disclosure, is also problematic as it misleads the customer. This misrepresentation, even if not an outright lie, erodes trust and can still lead to regulatory scrutiny and customer dissatisfaction. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical conflict. They should then consult relevant company policies, codes of conduct, and applicable regulations. If there is any ambiguity, seeking guidance from a supervisor or legal counsel is advisable. The decision should always err on the side of transparency and customer well-being, even if it means a short-term loss of a sale. This proactive and principled approach builds long-term trust and ensures sustainable business practices. Question 15. Analysis of the internal audit findings reveals a pattern of inconsistent application of candidate assessment criteria across different hiring managers within SAIC Motor. While the company aims to expedite the hiring process to meet business demands, the audit highlights potential deviations from established best practices for candidate evaluation. Considering the regulatory framework for hiring assessments, which of the following actions would best address the identified compliance and ethical concerns? Option A. Encourage hiring managers to continue using their preferred assessment methods, provided they document their rationale for each hiring decision to ensure transparency. Option B. Focus on streamlining the interview scheduling process to reduce overall time to hire, assuming that the current assessment methods are generally effective. Option C. Delegate the responsibility for developing assessment criteria to individual department heads, allowing for greater flexibility in meeting specific role requirements. Option D. Implement a standardized, documented assessment framework with clear scoring rubrics and conduct mandatory training for all hiring managers on its application and the underlying regulatory principles. The correct answer is D. Implement a standardized, documented assessment framework with clear scoring rubrics and conduct mandatory training for all hiring managers on its application and the underlying regulatory principles. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires navigating the delicate balance between business objectives and the stringent regulatory requirements of the SAIC Motor hiring assessment tests specified jurisdiction. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that all hiring practices are not only efficient, but also demonstrably compliant with the relevant employment laws and ethical guidelines. The need for a robust compliance framework is paramount to avoid legal repercussions, reputational damage, and unfair hiring practices. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding and application of the specific regulatory framework governing hiring within the SAIC motor context. This involves proactive measures such as developing clear, documented policies, providing comprehensive training to hiring managers, and establishing a system for regular review and auditing of hiring processes. This approach ensures that decisions are based on objective criteria, are free from bias, and adhere to legal mandates, thereby fostering a fair and equitable hiring environment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed and efficiency without adequate consideration for regulatory compliance would represent a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This could lead to discriminatory hiring practices, which are explicitly prohibited by employment law. Another incorrect approach that relies on informal or undocumented hiring criteria would fail to provide a defensible basis for hiring decisions, making the company vulnerable to legal challenges and accusations of favoritism or bias. Furthermore, an approach that neglects to train hiring managers on compliance issues would create a high risk of unintentional violations, as individuals may not be aware of their legal obligations or the ethical standards expected. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, identify all applicable regulations and guidelines. Second, assess the potential risks associated with each stage of the hiring process. Third, develop and implement clear, documented policies and procedures that align with regulatory requirements. Fourth, ensure that all personnel involved in hiring receive adequate training. Finally, establish a mechanism for ongoing monitoring, review, and improvement of the hiring process to maintain compliance and uphold ethical standards. Question 16. Quality control measures reveal that a minor software update intended to improve fuel efficiency in a newly released vehicle model has been implemented by the engineering team without undergoing the full documented approval process typically required for any modification to the vehicle's operational parameters. The update is considered minor by the engineers, but its potential impact on emissions compliance is not yet formally assessed or recorded. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Quality Control Department to ensure compliance and maintain product integrity? Option A. Accept the engineer's assurance of the update's minor nature and instruct them to document the change in the next scheduled maintenance update cycle, assuming no immediate regulatory concerns. Option B. Proceed with the market release of the updated software, as the engineers have deemed it a minor improvement, and address any potential compliance issues retrospectively if they arise. Option C. Halt all further production and sales of the vehicle model until a comprehensive recertification process, equivalent to that of a major design change, can be completed for the software update. Option D. Initiate an immediate, thorough review of the software update's impact on all relevant vehicle systems, including emissions, and ensure all findings and approvals are meticulously documented before any further deployment or market release of the updated software. The correct answer is D. Initiate an immediate, thorough review of the software update's impact on all relevant vehicle systems, including emissions, and ensure all findings and approvals are meticulously documented before any further deployment or market release of the updated software. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for timely product updates with the regulatory obligation to ensure that all modifications are thoroughly documented and approved before market release. The pressure to innovate and stay competitive can create a tension with the meticulous record-keeping and compliance requirements inherent in the automotive industry, particularly concerning safety and emissions. Professionals must exercise sound judgment to navigate this tension, ensuring that speed does not compromise integrity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review and documentation process that aligns with SAIC Motor's internal quality control procedures and any applicable regulatory standards for vehicle manufacturing. This ensures that all changes, even minor software updates, are assessed for their impact on safety, emissions, and overall vehicle performance. Documenting these assessments and approvals provides an auditable trail, which is crucial for regulatory compliance, product liability, and continuous improvement. This upholds the principle of due diligence and responsible product development. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to implement the software update without a formal review or documentation process, relying solely on the engineering team's assurance that it is a minor fix. This bypasses critical quality control checkpoints and regulatory requirements for change management. It creates a significant risk of noncompliance with vehicle safety and emission standards, potentially leading to recalls, fines, and reputational damage. Ethically, it fails to uphold the duty of care to consumers and the public. Another incorrect approach would be to delay the update indefinitely due to an overly cautious interpretation of documentation requirements, fearing that any deviation from the original design specifications, however minor, necessitates a full recertification. While thoroughness is important, an overly rigid approach can stifle innovation and prevent the timely delivery of improvements that could enhance vehicle safety or efficiency. This approach fails to demonstrate a balanced and pragmatic application of regulatory principles. A third incorrect approach would be to document the update retrospectively after it has been deployed to the market. This practice undermines the integrity of the quality control system and creates a false impression of compliance. It suggests a lack of proactive risk management and can be viewed as an attempt to circumvent regulatory oversight, leading to severe penalties and loss of trust. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to quality control and documentation. This involves establishing clear protocols for assessing the impact of any proposed change, regardless of its perceived magnitude. A tiered system for review and approval, commensurate with the potential risk, is essential. When faced with such a situation, the decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the specific regulatory requirements for change management in the automotive sector. 2. Evaluating the potential impact of the software update on safety, emissions, and performance. 3. Following established internal procedures for documentation and approval. 4. Consulting with relevant departments, e.g., legal, compliance, engineering, to ensure all aspects are covered. 5. Prioritizing compliance and safety while seeking efficient and effective solutions. Question 17. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the current candidate assessment process for SAIC Motor is perceived as lengthy, potentially impacting candidate engagement and time to hire. Management is keen to explore ways to streamline this process to improve efficiency. Considering the SAIC Motor hiring assessment test's objectives, which of the following approaches would be the most professionally sound and compliant method for addressing this feedback? Option A. Immediately reduce the number of assessment stages by half to significantly shorten the overall process, assuming that the core competencies can still be evaluated. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of each assessment stage to identify redundancies or areas where efficiency can be improved without compromising the assessment's validity or fairness, potentially involving data analysis of candidate performance at each stage and feedback from assessors. Option C. Implement a new, shorter assessment tool that has been recently developed by an external vendor without conducting an independent validation study for its suitability within SAIC Motor's specific hiring context. Option D. Focus solely on reducing the administrative time spent by HR personnel in scheduling and managing the assessments, without altering the assessment content or structure itself. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of each assessment stage to identify redundancies or areas where efficiency can be improved without compromising the assessment's validity or fairness, potentially involving data analysis of candidate performance at each stage and feedback from assessors. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization, where immediate cost savings might conflict with long-term operational efficiency and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in balancing competing stakeholder interests and ensuring that any proposed changes adhere strictly to the SAIC Motor hiring assessment test's regulatory framework, which emphasizes fairness, transparency, and data integrity in the hiring process. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough, data-driven evaluation of the existing process before implementing changes. This involves understanding the root causes of inefficiencies, assessing the impact of potential modifications on candidate experience and assessment validity, and ensuring that any proposed optimization aligns with the principles of fair hiring practices as implicitly or explicitly guided by the assessment's design and purpose. This aligns with best professional practice by demonstrating due diligence, a commitment to evidence-based decision-making, and a proactive approach to risk management. It upholds ethical standards by ensuring that the hiring process remains fair and unbiased, and it respects the regulatory intent of the assessment by not compromising its integrity for expediency. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reducing the number of assessment stages without understanding their purpose or impact would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to a failure to adequately assess candidate suitability, potentially resulting in the hiring of underqualified individuals, which indirectly violates the spirit of a robust hiring assessment. Furthermore, such a superficial change might overlook critical regulatory requirements related to equal opportunity and non-discrimination, as certain stages might be designed to mitigate bias. Another incorrect approach, such as implementing a new assessment tool without proper validation or pilot testing, risks introducing new biases or inaccuracies, thereby failing to meet the assessment's objectives and potentially contravening guidelines that mandate the use of validated assessment methods. This also disregards the need for a systematic and controlled implementation of changes, which is a cornerstone of professional process management. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the problem and gather comprehensive data on the current process's performance and stakeholder feedback. Second, identify potential solutions and rigorously evaluate their feasibility, impact, and alignment with regulatory requirements and ethical principles. Third, conduct pilot testing or phased implementation where appropriate, with clear metrics for success. Finally, monitor the outcomes and be prepared to iterate based on data and feedback, always prioritizing the integrity and fairness of the hiring process. Question 18. Research into the onboarding process for a new sales executive at SAIC Motor has revealed that the candidates provided educational certificates appear to be from an unaccredited institution. The hiring manager is eager to finalize the offer quickly due to a pressing need to fill the role before a major industry event. What is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Proceed with verifying the candidate's employment history and professional references while deferring a final decision on the educational qualification until after the offer is made, contingent on further investigation. Option B. Immediately contact the purported educational institution to verify the authenticity and accreditation of the certificates provided by the candidate. Option C. Inform the candidate that their educational certificates are unacceptable and withdraw the offer of employment without further inquiry. Option D. Accept the educational certificates at face value and proceed with the onboarding process, assuming the candidate's experience is sufficient to compensate for any potential discrepancies. The correct answer is A. Proceed with verifying the candidate's employment history and professional references while deferring a final decision on the educational qualification until after the offer is made, contingent on further investigation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to quickly onboard a new employee and the regulatory obligation to ensure all necessary checks are completed thoroughly and accurately. The pressure to expedite the process, especially in a competitive hiring market or for a critical role, can lead to shortcuts that compromise compliance and introduce significant risks. Careful judgment is required to balance operational needs with legal and ethical responsibilities. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process for verifying all information provided by the candidate. This includes cross-referencing details with official documents, conducting background checks through reputable agencies, and verifying references independently. This aligns with the SAIC Motor hiring assessment test's likely emphasis on due diligence, regulatory compliance e.g., employment law, data protection, and ethical hiring practices. It ensures that SAIC Motor is making informed decisions based on verified facts, mitigating risks of negligent hiring, fraud, or misrepresentation, and upholding its reputation. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that relies solely on the candidate's self-reported information without independent verification fails to meet the standard of due diligence expected in professional hiring. This is a regulatory failure, as it may contravene requirements for accurate record-keeping and potentially lead to the employment of individuals who do not meet qualifications or pose a risk. Ethically, it is a failure to act with integrity and fairness towards the company and other stakeholders. An approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy by accepting incomplete or questionable documentation is a direct contravention of regulatory frameworks governing employment and data integrity. It exposes SAIC Motor to legal liabilities, such as penalties for employing individuals without proper authorization or qualifications, and reputational damage. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of commitment to responsible business practices. An approach that delegates verification to an unqualified or unsupervised internal resource without clear guidelines or oversight introduces a high risk of error, bias, or even misconduct. This is a regulatory failure because it undermines the integrity of the hiring process and the reliability of the information gathered. Ethically, it is a failure to ensure a fair and objective assessment of candidates. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to hiring. This involves identifying potential risks associated with each stage of the hiring process, from application to onboarding. A robust verification process should be established, with clear protocols and responsibilities. When faced with pressure to expedite, professionals must advocate for adherence to established procedures, highlighting the potential legal, financial, and reputational consequences of non-compliance. Documentation is crucial at every step to demonstrate due diligence and provide an audit trail. Question 19. The monitoring system demonstrates an anomaly in the emissions control unit's performance, deviating from the established baseline parameters for particulate matter output. This deviation has been flagged as a potential breach of environmental regulations. Option A. Continue production as normal, but instruct the quality control team to increase random checks on the emissions of finished vehicles. Option B. Escalate the alert to the IT department to check for potential system errors in the monitoring system itself, without immediately investigating the emissions unit's physical performance. Option C. Log the anomaly for future review during the next scheduled maintenance cycle, assuming it is a minor fluctuation that will self-correct. Option D. Initiate a full diagnostic investigation into the emissions control unit, temporarily halting production of affected vehicles until the root cause is identified and rectified to ensure compliance with environmental regulations. The correct answer is D. Initiate a full diagnostic investigation into the emissions control unit, temporarily halting production of affected vehicles until the root cause is identified and rectified to ensure compliance with environmental regulations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate operational efficiency and long-term regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet production targets can lead to overlooking or downplaying potential compliance issues. The monitoring system's alert signifies a deviation from established procedures, requiring a judgment call on the severity and the appropriate response, balancing business needs with legal and ethical obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation of the alert, prioritizing regulatory adherence over immediate production demands. This aligns with the SAIC motor hiring assessment test's emphasis on regulatory compliance, which mandates that all operations must strictly adhere to the relevant laws and guidelines. By investigating the alert, the professional demonstrates a commitment to identifying and rectifying any potential breaches, thereby safeguarding the company from legal repercussions, reputational damage, and financial penalties. This proactive stance is a cornerstone of responsible corporate governance and ethical conduct within the automotive industry. Incorrect approaches analysis. Ignoring the alert or dismissing it as a minor glitch represents a failure to uphold regulatory obligations. This approach prioritizes short-term production goals over compliance, which is a direct contravention of the principles emphasized in the SAIC motor hiring assessment test. Such negligence can lead to significant legal penalties, regulatory sanctions, and a severe erosion of trust with stakeholders. Continuing operations without a proper understanding of the alert's cause is equally problematic. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for potential risks. This could result in the continuation or exacerbation of a non-compliant activity, increasing the likelihood of detection and subsequent penalties. It signifies a failure to implement effective risk management strategies, a key expectation in regulatory environments. Delegating the investigation to a junior team member without adequate oversight or clear instructions is an abdication of responsibility. While delegation can be efficient, it must be done with the understanding that ultimate accountability for regulatory compliance rests with senior personnel. This approach risks the alert being mishandled or its significance being underestimated, leading to potential compliance failures. It suggests a lack of commitment to personally ensuring regulatory standards are met. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, acknowledge the alert and its potential implications. Second, initiate an immediate, albeit preliminary, assessment to understand the nature of the deviation. Third, prioritize a comprehensive investigation, allocating necessary resources and expertise. Fourth, consult relevant regulatory documentation and internal policies to guide the investigation and remediation. Fifth, document all findings, actions taken, and decisions made. Finally, implement corrective actions and review the monitoring system to prevent recurrence, ensuring continuous improvement in regulatory compliance. This systematic approach ensures that operational pressures do not compromise legal and ethical standards.